In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to make these little mini pot holders that are designed for grabbing the hot handles of a pot or a lid. I would sell these as a set, or you could sell one with a skillet handle cover because these two pieces together work great for a hot cast iron pan. I'll link to the free pattern in the description, as well as the video and the pattern for this skillet handle cover. You'll have 2 pieces of fabric for the outside, 2 pieces for your lining, and 2 pieces of thermal batting, and then about 14 inches of bias tape. You're going to start with your outside pieces and place right sides together, and then place your batting, lining it up with the bottom edge, and making sure that it's equal a distance apart from that raw edge all the way around. Now you're going to use this edge of the batting as a guide, and so just inside of that, so you just pick up the edge of it, and so from one side to the other. Use a shorter stitch, which will make it easier to go around that curve, and if you have a walking foot, put that on your sewing machine. Press this seam open. Then trim the excess fabric off about 1/8 of an inch away from your seam. Next, you can flip it right side out and smooth that seam out. The next step is to sew your 2 lining pieces together. So line those up right sides together. And to make this edge easier to sew, to follow the curve, I like to use this batting pattern piece as a guideline. So I'll just set that on there, lining it up with the bottom edge and making sure it's even distance apart from that raw edge, and then just use a temporary fabric marker to trace around it. So just as you stitch the 2 outer pieces together, you're going to stitch just inside of this line about 1/8 of an inch and follow it all the way around using a shorter stitch. Press that seam open. And then trim the excess fabric off about 1/8 of an inch away from that seam. Now you can set your lining inside, line up the seams. And this is going to be a bit bigger than your outer piece because of all the bulk in there. So you can just, once you have it set into place, then you can trim this excess off. To finish this raw edge, we're going to use bias tape. So you can open that up and you'll start sewing it on about 2.5 to 3 inches away from this edge. And it's easiest if you find a straighter edge there. So you'll just cover the edge of this with your bias tape, and you're going to stitch right in that first fold. And I like to start stitching on the right side rather than the lining first. As you come back around to the start of your stitching, you'll fold this piece back up to where your stitching is. And then you're going to lay your end piece back over top of it and stitch right up to that first line of stitching. Don't go over this fold. So now you can see I've got my bias tape stitched right up to each other. So you're going to flip this end over so that it's fully open. You don't want this folded in. And then you're going to lay this piece on top, right sides together, so that it's sitting perpendicular to this piece of bias tape. Make sure that's fully opened up as well. There's no creases. And then you can just put 1 pin in there to make sure it doesn't move. And you're going to stitch a line diagonally from that point where this edge and this edge intersect all the way up to your stitching. Now you can flip that over, make sure that that seam looks nice and flat, and if it does, then you can trim off this excess. We have the first side of our bias tape stitched on, so this seam that you just finished, you can finger press that open, and then you can flip your bias tape over to the other side. Now we're going to make sure that our second fold of our bias tape covers that line of stitching that we just completed. So place it over that and clip it into place. Then I flip it wrong side out, and I'm going to stitch on this side about 1/8 of an inch inside from that folded edge of the bias tape. And as I go, I'll just check to make sure that this folded edge is covering that line of stitching. Now you can flip it right side out and give it a quick press. And there's your finished hot pot lid holder.